Hello and welcome to this video, guys. Today we're going to talk about something I usually name as a bridge pattern. It's something that you would encapsulate within, for instance, a shared library or within your application in order for you to not be exposed to third-party libraries everywhere in your code base. We're going to look into why and why you should start refactoring the code early if you have done this mistake already. So imagine now we have one application. This application utilizes date-definiteness, right? So each one of the application that we have probably will have the date FNS in a couple of different, or really it could be throughout the whole code base, which means if you decide to change date FNS to another date library that might come in the future, you will have to do it in every place that it's being exposed. So instead of having it in each component or in every component that utilize date functions, there's one pattern you should strive for. So now we have one application and you have date-definiteness in that application. Imagine if you have 9 applications, what would happen if you would have 9 applications utilizing the date-definiteness logic in a large organization where you would have to refactor all of these chunks of code. It would be a mess, it would be super expensive for the organization, and it would be a lot of wasteful money being spent. So one obvious solution could be to create a library. You would have an encapsulating library that only utilizes the date-definiteness function. So you would essentially just extend the features of date-definiteness and you would communicate with that library or that package from within our library. So instead of having it everywhere in these applications, you would instead just have it in the organization date utils. And instead of having date-definiteness here, you would just have the reference to the organization date utils from all of these applications, which means if we want to change whatever we have within the shared library, we can change from date-definiteness. And now imagine we would go back in time and we would go to Moment.js. This would be so much easier to do. Now Moment.js is deprecated. It's not supposed to be used at all. So maybe in the future date-definiteness might have similar issues and then we would just convert to another library. Right, so we're going to look into how this might work and we're going to limit this one into one single application. This concept is not related to any programming language, really. This is something that you could have in backend, in frontend, especially in React, Angular, and so on. So we're going to look at this concept in Angular just to perceive how this logic might work and how you might work with it. All right, so let's jump into the code. So usually what you would do is you would just import a set of a feature from date-definiteness. So you would, instead of importing, let's say we're going to import format as format date-definiteness from date-definiteness. So you would only expose this part of the code from towards the third-party library that we're pulling in. So this would be date-definiteness. And the reason to why I rename it here is so that you can essentially add a function here and it should be export function, format. And you just have the same thing. So it would take a date. You could essentially just copy whatever you have here. And you can import this one. Obviously it did not work. Let's see here. All right, so here I usually would go with string or date. I would not want to have something else, format string. So this would be, for instance, what type of format you would want to have. And here is probably where you would have date format. And here you would have supported date format. So you'd have export enum, date format, something similar like this so that you easily can format things. So you would probably have this and you would have a default. Maybe the default would be, it could be date maybe, and what you usually want to return with the format would be a string. So this is an example of how you can do it. So the benefits of this is if you decide to have another library or if you decide to do it natively, you still have an interface that you can work with. So you still have the inputs, the date and the format, and you can build your own logic to get rid of the date-definiteness library in the future. So if you would have, for instance, in our application, we would have multiple instances using this format instead of data finesse, you can change it in one place. You can also ensure to test it in one place. It would be so much easier to just test. So you'd have specs for this setup, different use cases and scenarios that you would have to ensure that when you refactor, you will not break any of the edge cases that you previously had. And I think this is a super good pattern that you should have. This is also something that could be utilized for instance, component libraries as well. If you would pull in Angular material, or if you would pull in any other language. For instance, if you would drag in, maybe it could be PrimeNG and so on. The reason to why it would be good to encapsulate the logic is because you want to be able to switch it and change it based on your organization's needs. I hope you guys find this video interesting. Please leave a comment, feedback for this video, and please do not forget to subscribe. All of the best. Thanks.